wanted to thank Marie and Lynn who read copies of the manuscript and made comments and helped shepherd the thing through the process until we got it to where we're at. Now, all I'm going to do is introduce Charlotte Williams to you. She's going to be our MC for the evening. And I'm going to sit in that chair to keep the book on. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good evening. After the program is over, I also wanted to just mention the bathroom is out these doors to your left, and there's food back here at the back. Whenever we have a break, you can get some food. The books are being sold down at the back. They're a special tonight, $20, normally $25, but this is a one occasion thing, so this is your chance. There's also some Rocky buttons that are for sale back at the back.
Burnley Rocky Jones, the revolutionary. But more important than that, it's about community. And when I see the diverse community that is in this room tonight, I say, well done, well done.
Talking.
Thank you, brother. Is that better? Bill got my back as always. And I just want to say, because it's interesting, the Joneses are cousins of my family, or my family is cousins to the Joneses. And I had to check with Mom, who I'm surprised she's not here, but many of you know she just turned 93. And I was talking to her this week. I said, Mom, how are we related to the Joneses? So she tells me that her grandmother was a sister to Jerry Jones, their grandfather. So that's how we're related. So I just wanted to make sure, because I didn't want to stand up here and tell any lies about being related, because I'm sure everybody's a cousin tonight. Well, Cindy and Freedom are going to do their thing and lead us in the Black National Anthem.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening tides. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the faith that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of a new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won.
So what's this libation all about? Today I'll use the fluid water, a symbol of life and vitality. And as I make and nourish this plant with the water, I'm going to review some of the central teachings of the libation with you, okay? Let it be a reminder of our core teachings and ancestral raisings in spirituality as we conduct ourselves in the community. The first reminder is of harmony. Our great ancestors taught us that this creation is no more than a musical performance by the Creator himself. And as his children, we should play in harmony. Also in this great creation is the natural state of abundance. And the gift of water today is also a symbol of natural abundance that we all share. It's recycled through the planet. One day it's in your body, the next day it may be in my body, and it might have been in a T-Rex's body however many years ago. The final reminder is of nourishment, to nourish our mind, body, and spirit, not just the body, to know that water carries enormous significance, whether you're a society of abundance or scarcity. Thank you.
As a dangerous radical. Had the police watching his house and his vote tax gone national, but consciousness united with will is something magical, so they could never make Rocky quit. He didn't have more gifts than you or me, but he lived. He believed in the community and always stayed committed. When I tell you he was a giant, it was as simple as this. We are stronger together than we are all in bits. You couldn't fit into the history books the impact of when he died. We all felt like we'd all be his kids. His wealth was his knowledge. He never got rich, and that's why he's our champ, and that's why he'll be missed. He didn't aim for his name up on the buildings. His legacy was felt in our minds and ignited our spirits. And no, he wasn't no saint, but his love, that was genuine. Rocky didn't have no people. He could've. He was a lawyer. He could have had that Fendi, that Gucci, that Versace with some scheming, but he was never about chasing that dream. And like every great Black Scotian on down from Richard Preston, his mission was simply to make us connected, to roll in one team like a unified collective with respect for who we are, where we're from, like an unbeatable one. Rocky never tapped out. He went so many rounds in the struggle, but he never lost consciousness, and they could never knock him Black out. When they tried over and over to wipe us out, he raised us up to our feet when we thought we were down, and when they came round to knock our homes down, Rocky brought the Panthers up. Shook everyone up by throwing a black fist up. He never gave up no ground. And they never gave him no crown. But he was a king, because no matter what they came at him with, he never stepped out the ring, not even when they burned his house down with his children inside. Just for teaching his people about Black pride, and everything he had left, he kept demanding our rights. He was like a rocky mountain. He could not be moved. He would not be turned aside. He never sold out. He never even tried. Whatever we needed, he worked to provide. The weight was never too heavy for him to pick his share up. And when things got rocky, Rocky stepped up. Whenever there was a problem, you could call him up, because Rocky was always down. If you needed some backup, he was always around. You wanted him in your corner, because he never backed down. And round here, Black leaders aren't just made in elections. It was the mass of Black people who gave Rocky directions, because every truly great leader is a humble follower. And that's why he knew each of you was the community's tomorrow. He was waiting for you to take his back. And I can't tell you his whole story, but I can say what I felt if you need inspiration. Here is his motivation: Black history, Black pride, Black power, Black love. Here is his education: get down in the struggle, don't hold yourself above. And now here's my explanation. Until his heart gave out inside him, he fought without gloves, because Rocky was a heavyweight, a legend. He wasn't no boxer, but he was one of the greats, the spirit of George Dixon, the grit of Sam Lankford, but he landed his blows like a Black power anthem. And if you ask any Scotian, we'll make one thing known: there was no harder fighter than Burnley Rocky Jones.
And our last meeting together, our last chance to speak together, was at Hubbard's Primary School. Well, you can talk at university audiences and to 6 and 8-year-olds. It was grade 1 to 6, I think. And they all sat on the floor in their gym. And we spoke to them, and it was lovely. One kid asked Rocky if he'd ever been a slave. He was very patient in his reply. And that was in February of 2013, on my last visit to Rocky while he was still alive. The other, I guess, our major collaboration is the Transition Bureau program, which is still, of course, existing. I won't go into that in any detail, except to say that Rocky and I formulated the notion of a Transition Bureau program and participated in its founding by Dalhousie, and then we both taught in the program. And I'm happy to say, well, actually, I'm happy to say it's still going on. In a way, I'm happy to say it's still going on. Isaac, of course, is its director now. But we said this at the 20th anniversary. It's not what the 47th or something. We said, Rocky and I said, at the 20th anniversary of TYB, if we know it was going to last for 20 years, we would have done something else. If we didn't think we were establishing a new institution, we thought we were bringing this in, or we thought we were doing something, a sharp intervention, and of course it's been along, but still very valuable. I shouldn't put any bug in there. A very valuable institution, and the graduates of the TYB have taken up positions of leadership all across the province in the Black community and the Black community. So perhaps I should retract what Rocky and I said at the 20th anniversary. The morning after, Rocky, who seems to believe what he said, why don't we three write a book? Because we said so many nice things about the problem was really important. So we said, okay. I said, okay. George said, okay. And so we started hesitatingly at first in 2004, but picking up speed over the years until 2013. So, and now it's 2016, so that's 12 years since this book was initiated. It's finally out. We started taping discussions amongst ourselves. First of all, I drew up a bit of an outline of what I thought would be Rocky's career, based on archival research, newspaper clippings, and so on. And this is about 40 pages long. I'm going to put all my papers in the University of Waterloo archives. The library has an archival section. I'd like Lynn to put some of her stuff in St. Mary's just recently. So they'll be there for anybody who wants to go. So that was what we started with. And then we talked around and about. George, of course, is a poet, so we didn't always go with a straight line. But we eventually got all these hours down. We got up to about 2003 with the story when Rocky died in 2013. The product of the book is a mixture, as I say. I said it to my wife, and said, well, that's good, so I'm going to use it. A mixture of Jack Kerouac and Malcolm X. It's an exciting story. There's some road trips in it. There's black radicalism. There's oppression. There's police. There's attempts to eliminate Rocky, as was mentioned, by setting the house on fire not once but twice. So it is a great story. It's very engaging. And if anybody wants me to answer the other questions, it'll have to be your question, my answer later on in the proceedings. Okay, that's like two.
And the first person to come forward is Marie Francis, Rocky's sister. And Marie will be followed by a short video presentation of Rocky at Quacha House.
May I say something before I read? And first of all, I want to again, as my niece has spoken so beautifully in welcoming everybody and thanking you. And I want to thank everyone who has been a part of Burnley Rocky Jones's life and have been part of the story. And if he were here tonight, I know he would say everyone has a story. And we need to just do it and to write something. And I also want to say that if Rocky didn't know about the Loyalists, he wasn't listening. Because in our home growing up, right from my grand aunt, who was actually the very first black school teacher accredited in Nova Scotia, and her name was Martha Eleanor Jones. She taught all around Nova Scotia. She had so many books that were left in the home that we would read. And one in particular that was written by the first AME bishop to Africa was called Flaming Torch in Deepest Africa. And it showed all the different African peoples. We had Uncle Tom's Cabin and so many black books. And then we had the AUBA, African United Baptist Association of Nova Scotia, that chronicled the fact that our people, most of the black people in Nova Scotia, had come as loyalists to Nova Scotia. We had the story of the Diasporas, just so much history that if he were listening, but little boys don't always listen, he would have known. And that's all I want to say. We have to teach our children as black people who they are and from whence they came. So this book is almost like an introduction to life. This is chapter 1 on the marsh, and it's from page 7. I took my first sense of identity from my family. I was a Jones. I was Jerry Jones's grandson, decorated World War hero. I was Elmer Jones's son, World War II hero, wounded in the service. I was Rowena Jones's son, a powerful force in our community who told me, "You are just as good as anybody." Never let anybody do anything or say anything to demean you. My family was well known and well respected. It automatically gave me built-in protection and acceptance wherever I went in my community. As much as you define yourself, the community defines you. Because of the family I was born into, there were certain expectations, and people would voice it. Listen, you are not supposed to do this. You are Elmer's son or Jerry's grandson, and you should know better. That's what they would literally say. You should know better. I've always thought my protection is my family and the extended family of my community. They have protected me, they have looked after me, they have made it possible for me to develop. I give full credit everywhere I go to my family and the marsh in Toronto. Wherever I speak, whatever I do, because they made it possible. From page 9. My father had a steady job, what was later called a stationary engineer. He looked after the boilers for the Lewis Eastern Hat and Felt Company. And later on, he worked at the post office looking after their boilers. A steady job gave a lot of prestige in the community. He carried a lunch pail to work, depending on his shift. Came home, went to sleep, got up, and did his chores, and went back to work. At the end of the week, he handed his paycheck envelope over to my mother, who looked after all the family expenses. He must have kept a little aside for himself, because on special occasions, he would invite his men friends over for a drink. Our parents had an agreement that there would be no drinking of alcohol in the house. So he had to take his friends out to the barn. And even in the barn, it couldn't be obvious. The rum was always hidden in the feed barrel. There's no question our mother knew he bought alcohol. She grew up in a situation where alcoholism and a lot of drinking. And there was never going to be any drinking in her house. My father had a stash in the house, in a little cubby hole in the hallway over top of the door. That was the little tiny box. He could sneak in there and have a drink by himself. The corks were always getting notes in the burn. Everybody always knew. The community knew, and some friends might say, well, Amber, I think we better go out and see them chickens, how they're doing. They all knew. Everybody knew what was going on. If you came to our house, you got your drink out in the barn. My mother was the one who articulated values. She was emotional, so she could cry. If something went wrong, as tough as she could cry. And my mother made it possible for even us as men to be able to cry. It wasn't wrong for us to do that. My mother was the one who really instilled in us a sense of pride that we should have, being who we are. My mother was the one who taught us that you can't lord it over anybody. You can't take advantage of anybody. You must always be fair. She would find opportunities to say that. Whereas my father really said anything, my mother could talk. If something happened at the school, my mother would assess it and she'd say, we are going right back to that school. And she would be the one who would either have you by the ear or holding your hand, whichever was appropriate. She was the one to deal with it. She provided that kind of strength in terms of any of the problems that we encountered growing up. I wondered at times who made the decisions and how much. I know she made immediate decisions. They never argued in front of us. They believed that they should shelter the children from any kind of conflict. She was certainly in charge of our discipline. If we were behaving particularly badly, she'd say, wait until your father gets home. You are going to get a beating. You'd go all day, hoping she forgets, but she never forgets. Now that I think back at it, it must have been tough for my father to come home. He hasn't been there all day, and now he's supposed to be the one to administer this beating. It was an awful thing. I saw many times my father came home and I'd be doing stuff, kind of hoping to stay out of the way. And I'd go to bed and then I'd hear him coming. And I'd get down on my knees saying my prayers. I could pray a long time. I'd be there and he'd be getting ready for bed. And I'd be praying that I could outlast him. And then he'd have to come in and give me my beating. I never got a beating I didn't deserve. But as a father, you look back at it and think, gee whiz.
Right now I have the pleasure of introducing somebody who's been mentioned already this evening, one of my TYP brothers, Gilbert Day.
And Gilbert's going to be followed by the Rocky TED Talk, the first excerpt.
Oh wow, this is my first look at this audience. It was great. See so many people here that Rocky and I shared some relationships with, almost everybody in this room. So it's really good to see everybody here. I could acknowledge Sharon out there looking good here tonight. Rocky's widow who's always got a wonderful smile and provides so much strength to the family and keeping the name of Rocky going on. Shaylin will be up later on, and you'll meet some others in the family. You met Tracy. Always good to see everybody out anyway. I'm here to talk About chapter 2, or from chapter 2, it's on the roads and in the streets. And I did an awful lot of road trips with Rocky. And when I first met him, it was a bit of a street encounter. Rocky's a lot older than me, of course, but we did travel around quite a bit. But before we traveled, and I was only about 12 or 13 years old, I think, hanging out with a gang on Creighton Street. Rocky used to have a store down on Birmingham Street called the Nile, and I traveled with a pack of guys. We were all around town. Stopped into the Nile and had some really nice, what we called rags back then. You know, he had some leather vests and leather coats and leather pouches and all this really hip stuff. But Rocky wasn't in the store. He had another guy working there, and the guys that I was traveling around with, you know, they were pretty bold, and them boys could steal. So, sure enough, before I even knew it, we came out of the store, and them boys were loaded. Man, we were walking down the street, they had vests under here, they had coats under here, they had, hey man, you want a poach, man? Well, anyway, we got back up around Creighton Street, got all the way back uptown, came down the corner of Gare Street, which is now Buddy Day Street, and right on the steps of the Prize Fighters Club was Rocky Jones, coming down the steps, and this is just after this big incident that, you know, he had at the Prize Fighters Club that a lot of people here would know about. He was quite famous at the time. He was a scary dude. Stopped us right on the corner. The boys froze. 13 of us, we all froze. I want all of my stuff back now. No problem, Mr. Jones, boy. The boys unloaded it. And by the way, Rocky, it wasn't me. It was that fellow over there. But anyway, I'll give you another little story about the road trip that Rocky and I had. It was a bit of a funny story. But first, I'll go on to doing what I'm supposed to be doing here. Reading from chapter 2, On the Road and in the Streets, on paragraph 33, I think. And it says Rocky's telling this story to Jim. So it's Rocky's voice, Jim's literary contributions here, and some of you can guess where they come in. That's good. He'll give you a prize. All right. Well, when I was going there, that's to Chilliwack, BC, to join the Army on a train, I was still Burnley. Burnley Jones was all anybody ever called me. I was on the train and I was scared, my first time away from home, and no black kids on the train. And it was a troop train, so they were picking up these soldiers all the way across and dropping them off. A couple of cars attached to a regular train. My bravado was, don't knock the rock. And I remember Bill Haley in the comments were popular with Rock Around the Clock that night, Rock Around the Clock at that time. Some of the soldiers said, so you think you're Rocky, do you? I said, yeah. And that is where the nickname came, on that train trip. It was 6 days and 5 nights. I went on the train as Burnley. I got off the train as Rocky Jones. Paragraph 37. I think the big thing that happened is that my sister was getting married, and I asked for leave to go to her wedding. And they were going to give it to me, but then they asked, how many sisters do you have? And I said, well, 7. And they said, well, if you leave every time you have a sister who's getting married, you'd never be here. We can't do that. They said, no. So I decided I was going anyway. So me and this other guy, Sam, we made plans to go AWOL. The guys tried to talk me out of it. They said, nobody has ever been successfully gone AWOL from this camp. And you're sitting in the Fraser Valley, there's nowhere to go. Well, there's a border across. There's a border to cross if you go that way. So I got a bunch of slips so I could make up some phony IDs and everything. And these false documents got us across the border. Dressed in our Canadian uniforms. It was an interesting trip when I went AWOL. chapter 38, or paragraph 38, sorry, not chapter, third paragraph. Well, we go along further and we're freezing cold. Sam wanted to stop. I said, you can't stop, man. You got to keep moving. You'll freeze to death on this highway. He was crying because I was grabbing him, and I said, no, we're not stopping. And then we see this pen with buffalo in it, and we see this pile of manure in the snow. And I'd seen in the movies about the heat that comes from a manure pile. So I said to Sam, you may not like this, but this is what we're going to do. We're going to pull back that manure and we're going to get in it. You know, he argued, and I said, yeah, we're going to get in that manure pile. Well, he argued, and I said, this is going to save your life. In the morning, we pulled out of that. I know we must have been rank. And along comes the state trooper. We were hitchhiking, and he says, you're not allowed to hitchhike here. And we said, oh, we got no choice. We're in the middle of nowhere. And he says, I'm going to have to take you in. So we get in his car. The trooper says, whoa, whoa, what the hell? You stink to high hell. I explained to him that it was so cold, we had to do something, and this is what we did. So he said, well, I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're deporting you. So he gets on the radio, and he radios ahead, and he has gotten these two Canadians, and so he gets on the radio and he radios ahead that he's got these two Canadians, and they're being deported. And he drove us to the border of his state, and at the border there was another cop, and he turned us over. They drove us all the way to Fort William in Thunder Bay, Ontario. The cops in the States passed us from one to another, and they gave us a ride all the way across. In fact, I think the smell was the reason they did it. I think they would have taken us to jail otherwise, and then we would have found out. At the Canadian border, they just told us, this is it, get out of here, you're deported, don't come back. So anyway, that's that from chapter 2. Buy the book and you'll get the rest. But I'll tell you one story about traveling with Rocky. I mean, we were on a road trip one time, and I learned, this was, I think, probably the first road trip that I was on with Rocky. And I learned then, you let Rocky do the talking. We were in Toronto with Rope. We were working with the ex-cons and things, and we had Saturday night loose. So we looked up some guys in Nova Scotia, and we knew a couple guys. They ran an after-hours club, so we went by the after-hours club and about 4 in the morning. We came up out of the after-hours club. You had to come upstairs and over on the street on Bathurst. There's a corner there. It's 4 corners. And then, from every direction, the whole four corners, there was cop cars that came up, squealed up to us. Cop got out of every car, out of every door. Every door got out, the cop come over with billies. And they came up and they were right up on us. And Rocky said to me, he said, let me do the talking. I said, no problem. This is just after, you know, there was a lot of police shootings, and they were shooting black people in Toronto. And I said, well, I didn't know Toronto too much. I'm going to let it talk. So they said, what are you guys doing? Rocky said, oh yeah, well, where are you going? Back to our hotel. Where are you staying? The Carlton Hotel. Oh yeah. So one of the other cops started nodding. He's lying, we'll trick him up. What room, what's your room number? Rocky had a friend who got put up in the penthouse, and he asked me, where you at? And I said, well, 21st floor. So the guy said, well, let's see your IDs. He said, what are you doing in Toronto anyway? Rocky said, well, we're here on some important work business. We were there for various stuff to do with ex-cons and stuff. So they said, well, let's see your ID. And the parole office had given us those Solicitor General IDs, and there's a little seal on it that looks like a bit of, like a badge, and our pictures are on there. And we're looking all, and they looked at the IDs, looked at it, passed it around. What's this stuff? You ever see one like this? And I said, Rocky, enough of this, man. I snatched the ID. I said, look, it's federal issue. Come on, Rocky. Rocky said, yeah, stop that cab. So we walked through this big army of cops with these billies and everything, and they were scared. They were scared to touch us. We just kept on strutting, jumping through the cab. Told the man, take us to the penthouse. Yeah.
Coming to the microphone next is a young man who did not meet Rocky. But if Rocky was still here, this is a young man that Rocky would have spent a lot of time with. He's been here for 7 years, originally from Zimbabwe, and he is going to do the next reading, and that will be followed by a second excerpt of the TED Talk. So please welcome Tendai Handau.
It is an honor for me to be standing in front of Rocky's family and friends and sharing some of his words with everyone. I never got the chance to meet Rocky. It would have been a privilege to do so. But for those of us who never got that chance, I hope that we can finally have that within the pages of this book. Chapter 6, Black Power. Tariq Ali wrote a book about 1968, the great year of revolution around the world. It doesn't even mention Canada. Well, we had our own 1968 in Canada. For me, the most exciting part of that revolutionary year would start with the Congress of Black Writers, which met in Montreal in October. I was invited to give 2 talks, one on the opening night of the conference and then another at the closing. These 2 jobs gave me a fairly prominent place on the agenda. The conference brought together not only Black writers, but many important intellectuals and community organizers from Canada, the States, the Caribbean, Africa, England. It was absolutely amazing. The organizing committee in Montreal had Rosie Douglas's chair and Clarence Baines and Juanita Westmoreland. From around the world, we had CLR James, undoubtedly the most respected person at the conference, Carlos Smith, who had given the Black Power salute at the Mexico City Olympics that year, Michael X, Bobby Hill, Walter Rodney, and above all, Stokely Carmichael, who was then Prime Minister of the Black Panther Party. Most of our reading list in the Shepperson Seminar at Dalhousie were there in person. Here I am, this boy from the marsh, with all these leading lights in the global Black community. Joan was there with a camera, and she took pictures of me with all these great people, and I took some of her with them too. These were people I had been admiring from afar. It was exhilarating and humbling at the same time, a lifetime highlight. But the person I spent most time with in Montreal was Stokely Carmichael. I had never met him before, and here I was associated with his name all across Canada. He was so energized by what was going on. This, plus his natural charismatic self, made him sort of a star the whole time. The energy was fantastic. For some reason, again, the 2 of us just hit it off. There was something there. We'd get off in the corner whenever we could. He was interested in learning about Nova Scotia. He made one comment during an interview telling the reporter, "Aggressive violence is essential if the Blacks are going to change their status. In performing such violence, the blacks would do to the whites only what has been done to the blacks many times in the past. And he was including Nova Scotia. We'd been sitting in a hotel room talking, and he was saying he was feeling so pressured. I knew the feeling. So I said, come on down with me and chill for a while in Halifax. Nobody will know who you are. He said, that is a good idea, but we can't tell anybody. No, we won't tell anybody. We'll make the arrangements. You come down, spend a week or so with me. I'm saying to him, you are starting to get fried, man. So we said, okay. Now he goes to speak to Miriam Makeba. They would change the arrangements and nobody would know. Joan and Miriam have been getting along great through the conference, so it was okay with them. We would all quietly hang out. Well, he makes his arrangements. Joan and I fly home, and Stokely and Miriam are to follow in a day or two. It is interesting to me now how naive we were. We thought we could keep this a secret. Back in Halifax, I decided that if the Mounties are following my car, I'd better have a different car. So I borrowed the car from my friend Jim Walker. He would spend the day driving around Halifax in my red VW Bug and let the Mounties follow him. I could go to the airport anonymously to pick up Stokely and Miriam. When their plane arrives, the airport is full of cops. They knew every move we were making. But we managed to slip away in Jim's car, and I'm thinking, how are we going to get into Halifax? I was speeding a bit desperately, and I'll never forget Stokely's words to me. Slow down, brother. You can't organize revolution around a car accident. It is okay if I get shot dead. People will rebel because of it. If we just have a car accident, I am dying in vain. That is what he told me on the way in. Anyway, we're coming to town, to our house on Pepperell Street. There are cops parked in front of my house, press 2. All of a sudden, this nice little quiet getaway is now a public thing. Stokely Carmichael is in town.
Coming to the microphone next are two of Rocky's children, Tracy Jones Grant and Casey Jones, reading from chapter 9.
We're not going to share a bunch of stories because we're kids, so we don't necessarily have the stories through the same eyes that he would have as the person who lived them. But I do know how proud he was of his practice of law and the things that he did. And so we're going to be reading from chapter 9 into the courtroom.
The community was stirred up about this. Judge Connie Sparks being accused of apprehended biases. Because after all those years of black people experience bias from police and courts now, for the first time, a judge gets called on racial bias, and it's a black judge who is being accused of racial bias. I knew absolutely that Glooby had to be appealed further. The Crown says to me, don't worry about a new trial. The kid won't be in big trouble. We'll make a deal.
I say, how can I make a deal when Judge Sparks was right? Cops do overreact when dealing with black kids. So I go to the clinic and say, I want to appeal Glooby's decision. And the clinic says, that will take a lot of resources. I almost lost my job on that one. It was a knockdown fight. I had the support of the law school, so the clinic finally agreed to appeal. Connie Sparks was out of the game at this point, unable to defend herself. There were no senior black lawyers around in Halifax. Tony Ross had gone, Davies Begenberry had gone. People I could have turned to weren't there. I'm stuck with it. I was never the greatest scholar. I wouldn't pick me to argue a case. But fortunately, with serious help from the law school profs, especially Richard Devlin, Diane Potier, and Carolyn Alward, and from some of the clinic students, we put together a case to carry to the Nova Scotia Court of Appeal. We argued that the test for a reasonable apprehension of bias had been too strictly interpreted by Judge Glooby, and that Judge Sparks had been justified in considering the racial implications of the case in front of her. To ignore the race factor in a situation like that is not neutrality, but in fact perpetuates racial inequality by pretending it's not there. To eliminate racism, it has to be confronted directly, as Connie had done. And we argued that this is supported by the definition of equality rights in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. When an appeal to the Nova Scotia Supreme Court failed, Rocky took the case to the Supreme Court of Canada. There was a lot of publicity about the fact that we were going. The press covered it well, nationally and locally. And then we had our day in court, and of course, there's no decision that day, so it all kind of dies. It is like you've done all of this work, and everything is done, and it's all complete, and you sit and wait. And it goes right off the public radar. And then, 6 months later, you get word that the decision is coming down on such and such a day. But you've moved on to other things. I had gone out to BC for a fishing trip, and my Dow student Vince, who had been with me all along, sent me a fax with the précis of the decision to my brother Roger's place in Vancouver. This was September 1997. When I got home, I had a chance to read the full decision, and was it ever complicated? There were 4 separate judgments. Out of the 9 judges, basically 6 ruled that Connie was okay to say what she said. So that is the bottom line. We won 6-3. But in the ruling of those 6 judges who said there was no apprehension of bias, only 4 said there was no problem with her decision. The other 2 went on to be critical of the judge, but not critical enough. They said she almost crossed the line, but didn't quite cross the line. The final 3 simply condemned Connie's decision. So the court was really split in terms of that judgment, but we did get the majority for our side. And I'm sure people will be quoting those judgments in many future cases.
In the final analysis, contextualized judging was endorsed by our highest courts. A judge would be encouraged to bring their life experiences into their judgments. The existence of systematic racism was also acknowledged without the formality of a judicial notice. My own strategy was more or less upheld.
And it is based on this work that we talk about racism in the justice system. His going to the Supreme Court of Canada has impacted each and every one of us here today, and especially for those in the legal profession who can now use this as they go forward. We talk about Rocky the revolutionary. He certainly was. Thank you.
Thank you. We are now going to have a reading from Chapter 10 by another of Rocky's daughter, Falami Jones.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm doing Chapter 10, Citizen Jones, and I'm also conscious of the time, so I'm going to maybe just read 1 or 2 paragraphs. I also want to say it's kind of funny, on my way here, a few of us in the crowd went to play whist, and my dad loved whist. So it's interesting to hear all the different stories of how we knew, and Tracy talking about when we were young, which is really true. And one of the things my dad loved to do was play cards, and so I still do that with some family members and my mom. One other thing. Quattro House Cafe tomorrow will be hosting a meditation with Roger Holness and Dr. Omri, which I don't know if he's here, and thinking through healing the trauma of racism from 2 to 3:30. And then Dr. Isaac Saney will lead us in a conversation around revolution, thinking through revolution to visionary kind of practices. So Isaac will, if you want to ask more about that, that's from 4 to 6 also. Yeah. 3, 4, 50 Dutch Village Road in Fairview, which I should have brought flyers, but I don't, but there's some cards back there. Sometimes it's frustrating trying to be a good citizen. I was invited to join the Employment Equity Committee, made up of people who were all lawyers. It was chaired by Douglas Ruck. The Bar Society had a representative on the committee, and the law school was represented by Carol Elward. The government had a representative as well. I guess I was considered a community representative. We began by looking at hiring practices in law firms, and in particular, what was happening with the black students who came from the IBM program, and we moved out from there. This was one of the hardest working committees that I was ever involved with. Meetings were often early in the morning, and we did a lot of research on different policies that could improve the employment status of black people here in the province. We looked at a contract compliance, we looked at quotas, we looked at what was happening in other jurisdictions. It was a real thorough job. I was an advocate for contract compliance. I argued, and I still think that the government should show leadership in its own employment practices and have special hiring and training programs. We put pressure on the government to increase numbers in the civil service. The government in turn says, these jobs are open, but we're not getting the applicants, or there's nobody trained to take the position. So therefore, we're not discriminating, we just don't have the people. The ones who are applying are not the ones we need. In order to overcome that problem, we've got to have special training programs to give people the skills and credentials that are necessary for these jobs, both public sector and private. And we must specifically target particular occupations and be prepared to fully fund black students so they can become qualified. Unless there is special training to deal with that, nothing will happen. The government can say, we want to buy 20 widgets and we will accept bids from any firm that agrees to hire a percentage of their workforce from certain designated groups. If you want to do business with the government, this is the percentage that is the level they've got to be working at. Then the industry would hire these people in order to get the contract. Let me see where I want to go. The Black United Front began with such hope and idealism, but it went down the path of government dependency, and eventually it disappeared because it had long outlived its value to the community. If we want to address the social issues facing our community and our young people today, we have to construct organizations that are really and truly in the hands of the people and dedicated to the interests of the people. If you don't seize and hold power effectively, then the long-term transformation of the social problem is stymied. There you go. The institutions that do exist continue to support the kinds of social policies and political programs that are not helpful. They're not building a sense of community that would make our youngsters proud to participate for the benefit of everyone and not just for themselves as individuals. From a historical point of view, the message is that you need wholesale change, fundamental structural change. Messing around with partial reforms won't do anything except delay the solution. This is the critical lesson, I would say, of my lifetime as a community activist. As the saying goes, freedom is a constant struggle. Ashley.
I just want to say that David Woods is a multidisciplinary artist, writer, and performer from Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. He's published a notable collection of poetry, native song, that has been taught in English curriculums in schools and universities. His plays, including The Dream Continues, Part of the Deal, Black Journey, and Once, Africville Stories, have been broadcast on CBC Radio and presented on stages across Canada. He's the winner of several literary and art prizes, including the Nova Scotia Poetry Award, George Eliot Clark Literary Prize, the National Black Poetry Competition Prize, Canada Council Millennium Arts Award. He is also the winner of the 2016 Harry Jerome Award for Arts and Entertainment. He is currently working on Extraordinary Acts, a play on the experiences of the Black community during the 1917 Halifax explosion. David Woods.
I must say, just before he started his book, I had approached him, including a free meal and liquor, saying, I would like to write a play about you because I think you're one of the few people that can really say some real stuff. And he looked me in the eye and said, I appreciate the meal, but I just made a commitment to Jim Walker and George to write a book. I hope I get the opportunity someday to do a play about a remarkable man. Rocky has always been an influence, and I had dug through the very first poem I ever wrote about Rocky, 1979, and the very last poem I did about Rocky was at his wake. So I'm going to read them both. The first one's called The Birth of Knowledge, very much about my days at Dalhousie. It's Birth of Knowledge. Engaged as we were in the wars of the 70s, the erupting politics with a backdrop of bulldozed villages and ghettoized streets informing us, we were new to the stage and the chorus of praise, claimed as gifted youth, the new generation. University, the grand prize, dangled before us with awards and scholarships hung on our rural necks. We stayed in the high, bowing to an applauding audience, shaking hands with admiring donors, and the next day awoke to lectures on Plato and Aristotle, struggled through dense books and difficult assignments, the too-rushed agenda of academia that showed us our smallness in the scheme of things, at least how unprepared we were. In the initial shock, we retreated to the dorm to regroup and bandage our new wounds. And like frightened children around a crackling campfire, we sat and exchanged stories of overheard student conversations, racist lectures, and threatening messages on washroom walls. So even here, we were the university's niggers. As part of the course load, we audited once-a-month lectures at the TYP house. Rocky Jones spoke one night, his theme, the revolution, that we could dismiss this entire muck, blow up this marble and granite universe, and create a real path out of our own making. In the crowded lecture room, we could hear the uncomfortable applause, the groan of our peers, and quick apologies for his ideas. But his words struck a chord on the hushed fields of our youth, hoisted a new flag on the blank horizon. It was the first real thing I had heard in our 3 months there. His words stayed with me in that October night and wakened us the following day, their boldness and challenge to usual thought. And like a tip of metal coming upon a bright current, we took an initial shock before expanding to embrace its flame. And unfortunately, the last poem I wrote for Rocky, I was read at his wake. The Panther Who Roared. My name is Rocky Jones. My name is written in marshland and fog. My name is engraved in Nova Scotia basalt and granite stone. I have lived and loved in spasms. I prayed with devils and played cards with immaculate saints. My biography is written in blood. My name is Rocky Jones. I was born in a village swamp called Truro, Cobequid, in a strong family in a fiery red house. Truro was also my nemesis. Truro blooded my veins, yet denigrated my name. Truro nuanced my character, yet spat on my history. My name is Rocky Jones. I was a Negro outcast wandering the back roads and city streets until the truth seekers awakened me, until the speeches of Stokely Carmichael and Medgar Evans and Angela Davis, the purveyors of black revolution, halted my walk, and I could no longer be silent. My name is Rocky Jones, and I founded the Blue Nile, organized Kawasha House, led the march to create Buff, an organization for the people's self-determination. My name is Rocky Jones, and I collected the hero tapes, sought equal education in the universities. I chastised apartheid in South Africa. My name is Rocky Jones, and I traveled to Monastery and Upper Big Trackety and to Jordantown, Digby, the shocking villages of my people, organizing, speaking, teaching with one commission, to widen the smallest ambition, to fan the tiniest flame, to declare that this darkness imposed on us is not our destiny, that this poverty that diminishes us is not our lot, and together we must fight Amandla. Quasha House, TYP, the Black Coalition, Ujamaa were my foundings. Besides my own, George Clark, Shauna Paris, Gilbert Day, Carolyn Wright were also my children. With one voice, one song, we became strong. My name is Rocky Jones. Truth built me a stage. Conviction fashioned me a podium to stand on. Courage wrote my sentences. Passion raised the volume of my oration for all the people. For all the people. My name is Rocky Jones, and I have moved through marshland and fog to find my true self. Moved through marshland and fog to use my true voice. Take the gifts fashioned from my fast-burning years. I am going hunting now in new realms of revolution. Thank you.
Well, this brings our formal program to an end this evening. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for spending some time tonight, and I hope you all feel that Rocky's been here with us, and the memory is even stronger. As I said earlier, Rocky was about community. There are those that have said who will be the next Rocky, and I'm here to tell you there'll never be another Rocky. He was one of a kind. But Rocky did his work. Rocky trained a lot of people in this community. And Rocky always encouraged everyone to be their best self. There are a lot of leaders here in our community. And I know that each and every one of you has been charged with the responsibility of making this place a better place for all of us and for those who are coming behind us. So as we end tonight's program, I would like you to keep that in mind. I thank all of you who have been involved with the publication of this book. As I said earlier, I expect it to be a national bestseller. I thank all of those who have participated in this evening's program. And at this point, I want to, hi Jackie. Jackie is reminding me to tell people that the buttons are for sale, and the money is going towards the Rocky Jones Education Fund. And I think she also mentioned that she doesn't want to hear anything hit the bottom of that can, so she's looking for bills. I'm just saying. But as you mingle a bit this evening, get a little bit of something to eat down there, and make sure that you have your copy of the book. We're going to listen to a little more music by one of Rocky's favorite musicians, coming out of Beachville, Mr. Dennis Dorrington. I asked him if he was going to play Stagger Lee, but he said he didn't know the words, and he wasn't singing tonight, so that was one of Rocky's favorites. But nonetheless, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, thank you so much for having spent this time with us tonight.